I'm a battalion chief in Fairbanks, Alaska at the University Fire Department. I've been in the fire service for about 30 years at this point. I got started while I was still in high school, and that's the main thing that I do. When I turned about 45 years old, I decided it was time for me to do something different. I'd always viewed myself as an athlete, but at that point in my life, not too many things about my life looked very much like I was still athletic. I got introduced to a sport called Krav Maga, a self-defense technique that came from Israel. I went to a gym called Alaska Krav Maga and Fitness, which got me started into a grappling program, Muay Thai kickboxing program, eventually Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That then evolved into me doing MMA fights. I did my first MMA fight at 47 years old, and I'm 50 right now, about turning 51. I've had some really exciting fights. Started off in a real kind of seedy little dive bar. It was interesting to be probably the only guy anywhere close to his mid-40s in this bar when fighting started about 10 o'clock at night, which was normally about my bedtime. But I had a blast doing those fights. I found that I could be competitive with some pretty doggone good fighters, and that's been the case ever since. During that time, I've really also been on a quest for my own health, my fitness, my ability to keep my body working at the level that I needed to work. And what I realized was what I had been taught my whole life about diet and nutrition really didn't seem to be working that well. One of the things I started with is I went and got my blood worked up, and my triglycerides had continued to creep up and up and up to the point that I legitimately had high triglycerides. That didn't make any sense to me because at the time I was active, I was healthy, I was eating clean by what I believed to be eating clean. However, what I developed into was really probably what was a carbohydrate addiction. I had some sleep issues, which I still have because I've been a shift worker, being a firefighter my whole life. Firefighters and good sleep do not go together very well. We train ourselves to be able to go from a dead sleep to completely awake and able to perform at a pretty high level in a matter of minutes. So that's not conducive towards good sleep. So that also sort of evolved into, with me eating a low-fat diet my whole life, I relied on carbohydrates to kind of fill that gap. Lean protein, low carbohydrates, when you're fairly active, equates to somewhat of a calorie deficit, again, that I just filled up with carbohydrates. But what I've realized even then, before I understood what was going on, is I was hungry pretty much all the time, and I could only go a few hours without eating. So I got into this cycle of eating carbohydrates. My blood sugar would spike, my insulin would spike, that would clear the blood sugar out. I would store that as fat, even though I've never been particularly fat, but I've never been really lean like I would like to be either. And that eating cycle started to happen all the time. I also learned that if I ate carbohydrates in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep, it would put me right back to sleep. And it turned into a vicious cycle. Till the day that I went into the doctor's office and they said, yeah, you've got high cholesterol, which I've always had, moderate to high cholesterol, which at this point I'm really not worried about. But the triglycerides, that got my attention because by anybody's standard, a fatty liver is clearly not healthy for you. But again, it boggled my mind because I ate so lean that it didn't make any sense why I should have high triglycerides. And so that started me on the journey that I'm on now, when I realized that quite possibly really everything that I was taught from the time I was little, that fat is bad, carbohydrates are good, and this lean, low-fat thing, that's the direction that you should go. I don't believe that anymore. However, I've spent a lot of time researching diet and nutrition. It's kind of become an obsession for me. And I don't at this point know that I 100% agree with any of the so-called experts, or certainly the gurus that are out there that are preaching and teaching about nutrition. What I believe is that everybody's body is different, and that might work, what might work well for one person does not work at all for another person. I'll use my wife as an example. My wife eats as healthy and as nutritious and just the classic small portions. She's never really been into sweets, would always go out of her way to make a salad. She ate lean, healthy proteins, moderate amount of fats, doesn't have a sweet tooth, but would eat a lot of greens and salads and kale and broccoli and spinach. But she was having some real significant digestive issues. And I'd been starting to do some research on different diets, the keto diet, low carbohydrate diet, even the carnivore diet. And what I realized for her and watching how her body responded every time after she ate, I thought, maybe you should take a look at doing a completely different approach to your diet. And I finally, after a time when she had had a chicken salad for lunch and then had to go to bed because her stomach was so upset, I said, hey, why don't you try this carnivore diet? Just do it for a week or 2 weeks or maybe even a month and see how that makes you feel. Well, for her, the day that she stopped eating all of the foods that you and I grew up believing were healthy, kale, salad, broccoli, spinach, all of the raw, healthy, leafy vegetables, they were making her sick. And she'd been struggling with that for years. She'd feel bloated and she'd feel tired and she'd feel crampy and she'd feel uncomfortable. And that's something that she had dealt with for years and years and years. As she got older, into her late 40s and starting to approach 50, it became almost unmanageable. But she could never really figure out what it was. Long car drives, anytime she was in a seated position, she would actually have to lay down because she just felt so crampy and bloated and uncomfortable. The day she switched to the carnivore diet, instant relief. Literally the next day didn't have bloating. So that's been for a couple of months. She's gotten more and more and more relaxed on that diet, bringing other foods in. And the first day that she's felt bloated since she made that switch was day before yesterday. We'd gone out to dinner at a Mexican restaurant. We had fajitas. We split the plate because typically anytime we go out to eat, we'll split an order. That's plenty of food for us. We typically don't do an appetizer. We don't do desserts. But she ate 2 of the corn tortilla shells. And I think that's what made the difference. So that was the first time for her that she felt bloated since she'd gone on this restrictive diet. So could have been the vegetables, could have been the spices, but anyway, just kind of diverting off her regular diet was the first time that she felt uncomfortable. The irony of all this is we were doing everything that we thought that we were supposed to be doing in eating this clean, healthy, lean protein, virtually no fat diet. And for different reasons and different manifestations, it didn't work for either one of us. Now we're eating a very low carbohydrate, trying to eat very high fat and a medium amount of protein, and it's had great success for us. So what I want to do over the next few days and months and weeks or years, depending on however long this thing lasts, is I would really like to share with you the things that I have found that work really well for myself, to try to dispel a lot of the things that you may have been taught. I might get into some of the whats and the whys. We've been taught to eat the way we were taught to eat. Talk about the food pyramid that I think is completely fictitious at this point. We might get into a little bit of why are we being taught to eat so much bread and fruit and grains and all of those things, and the emphasis on good healthy fats. So I got a lot to say about that. I got a lot of theories on that. And there's a lot of things that I disagree with even the highest level experts, because when you start looking at some of the different camps, especially when you start getting into intermittent fasting, which I'm a huge fan of, low calorie, or calories input versus output. There's a whole bunch of people that just absolutely rail on like the Biggest Loser diet, and they say that calorie restriction has never worked for anyone. Well, I'm a big fan of the Biggest Loser. I love that show. I thought it was great. Now I know it was entertainment, but I also know that almost all of those people gained all of the weight back, and I also know that a calorie restricted diet rarely works long term for anyone. But I also know, so I'll hear people rant about how calorie restriction exclusively is not the way to lose weight, and what you should do is intermittent fasting, or eat keto, or eat paleo, or eat carnivore, or vegetarian, or vegan. And they claim that these are all the ways that you need to eat to lose weight and to get healthy. The problem with those things is what happens when you go off of those diets. And to me, the key here is you don't ever go off those diets. One of the big complaints, again, about the Biggest Loser diet is that when you go on a diet and you lose that much weight that aggressively, you actually have a metabolic slowdown. And to me, in a certain way of looking at things, that's fantastic. If I can make my body be more efficient, if my body will run as well as I need it to run on less calories, that's fantastic. My grocery bill just went down. The time that I spend shopping for food, eating food, preparing food, that's great. If I only needed to eat 1,600 calories a day in order to perform at the level that I perform, that's great news. But it's interesting that when people talk about, oh, you go on this particular diet, your metabolism is going to slow down. Well, that's going to be true for everyone, because if you had a huge machine, I don't care what it is, whether it's a human body, whether it's an animal body, whether it's a piece of machinery, a diesel truck, a gasoline truck, a big car, a little car, when you make that machine smaller, it takes less fuel to heat it. It takes less fuel to get it moving. It takes less fuel in order to operate it and continue it moving. So this reduction in your metabolism that we tout as being a terrible thing, that's a normal thing. Now, there is a point where we can reduce our metabolism so much that now we're cold all the time. And when I was in high school, so I was a wrestler in high school, and I starved myself because I didn't understand how to lose weight properly. So I would starve myself for typically 4 to 5 days out of the week. And then I would come up to my competition, and I wrestled. My senior year, I wrestled at 126 pounds. Me and my friend Junior Lambert, we both did it wrong. He was a great wrestler, and but both of us, we'd get to the weekend, we'd wrestle. We both wrestled to the same weight class, and we both did the same thing. I think he did a little worse than I did, but we'd get through the competition, and then we'd pig out for a couple of days, and then we'd starve ourselves for the rest of the week. But I can remember being in the back of the classroom in a room that was probably 70 degrees with my coat on, feeling cold all the time because I'd shut my metabolism down so much. Well, that's not what we're talking about. That's not what we want to be doing. You can do that. You can do that absolutely. Kind of the last thing with my little rant on calories in, calories out for those people that and this is I'm talking to a small group of people now. They're those people that are really into the keto diet or the carnivore diet or all of those things. And they'll swing the pendulum the other way, and they'll say, oh, calories don't matter. Well, if you say calories don't matter, then just don't eat. If calories don't matter, just take a supplement. Well, if you've ever seen pictures of Auschwitz or anybody with anorexia, clearly you know that calories do matter. We have to eat. We have to fuel our bodies. So there's a lot of people that will swing the pendulum the other way and say that, calories don't matter. It's all about your hormones, or it's all about, eliminating carbohydrates and just eating, fats and proteins and limit your carbohydrates so that you don't spike your insulin. And we'll get into that in great detail. Those things are all true, but calories still matter. There's another camp that says all calories are the same. It doesn't matter. You could drink a Coca-Cola or you could eat some broccoli. Well, that's insane. Most of us at my age, we understood, we started to learn about the glycemic index and that different carbohydrates respond in our bodies differently. What's fantastic to me is I remember when the Atkins diet came out. Now, to me, I was pretty curious about the Atkins diet because I like to explore new ideas. And it really made a lot of sense, even though it was contrary to everything that I knew and understood. But something about that just rang true. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is the people that I saw that went on the Atkins diet and went on it religiously and followed it accurately, they had incredible weight loss and their blood panels looked better and they just really felt good. And I was curious how that worked. Now that I've learned a little bit more, I totally understand how that works. But the problem with those people is they would go on that diet, they would lose the weight that they wanted to lose, then they would come off the diet and go right back to where they were to begin with. I take even for myself, I've got this down pretty well. I use a low calorie or a low carbohydrate diet. I do calorie restrict. I also do intermittent fasting because naturally my metabolism, it is not, I'm 50 years old. I'm really active. I've tried to keep my body weight down my whole life, but I've never been one of those people that's just naturally lean. When I was a little kid, I was kind of pudgy, a little bit pudgy. So I've always had to struggle with that. So there's a lot of different things that you need to do in order to make all of this work. Calories is part of it. The type of calories that you're eating, how much fat, how much carbohydrates, when you eat, how often you eat, all of those things matter. But here's the good news. I sincerely believe that any time that you're disciplined about what you're putting into your body and you're purposeful with the amount of exercise that you use, you're going to see results. But it's all relative. As I mentioned, I'm a firefighter. I've worked as a firefighter and a medic for over 30 years. We've transported patients that are 600 pounds. I remember a particular patient when I worked down in Kenai. They had to be transported, and so they were too big to be transported with the ambulance, even with the gurney out and the hardware pulled out. So they were transported with a U-Haul truck, and we got a C-130 because they had to be transported on their hospital bed. So their hospital bed was loaded into the back of a U-Haul truck and from the back of a U-Haul truck into a C-130. When you're at that point and you're that big and you want to change from the diet that you're eating right now to the Snicker bar diet, to where you're only eating Snicker bars every day, maybe at the tune of 5,000 calories, you're probably going to lose weight from whatever it was that you were doing to the 5,000 calorie a day Snicker bar diet. Now you get down to where I'm at right now, a lot of people too will say, well, exercise is one of the least effective ways in order to lose weight. And what I've preached for a very long time is you can't outrun your fork. In other words, if you're eating poorly, maybe you're a runner. I'm not a runner. I'm terrible at it and I don't enjoy doing it. But I got to run for about an hour in order to burn roughly 600 calories, 800 calories, something like that. Well, I love Subway. So if I go to Subway and have a Subway sandwich, I just ate 800 calories. A Snickers bar, if I remember correctly, which I loved when I was wrestling because I was starving all the time, and a Snickers bar was fantastic. That's about 270 calories. So 270 calories, that's 30 minutes worth of running. Most people don't go out for a run and run more than 30 minutes. Some of you do, but those of you that are running more than 30 minutes probably don't have a weight problem either. So again, all things are relative. when you get to the point that I'm at, I run naturally now at probably around 16% body fat. Somewhere in that ballpark is what my body likes. When I'm coming up to competition for a fight or for jiu-jitsu, I want my body in single digits. And it is a struggle to get there. So I use calorie restriction. Sorry for those of you that don't believe that's a real thing. But ironically, you watch enough videos, even the people that say calorie restriction is not a real thing, still talk about maybe eating too much within your eating window or feeding window. That's a real thing. You can still overeat no matter what diet you're using, even if you're just doing one meal a day. So I use calorie restriction. I use carbohydrate restriction. I use exercise. Sometimes I exercise twice a day. With all of those things, calorie restriction, intermittent fasting, carbohydrate restriction, exercise, it's still tough for me to get my body fat down into single digits, which is where I want to be again when I'm competing. I don't want to be bringing any fat to the game because I'm already slower than everybody else. I'm older than everybody else. Hopefully I'm a little wiser than everybody else. And the thing that works well for me is I've just got absolute sheer rock solid tenacity. When I get into a fight, my mentality is, I may not win, but you're going to have to kill me if you want to beat me. And I don't mean literally, but that's just the mentality. You're going to have to just beat me into absolute utter submission. And it's going to take you a long time. Sort of like a pit bull. Pit bull latches onto somebody. They won't let go. You can beat them in the head with a club, and they're not going to let go. That's kind of where I'm at. But if somebody's beat me on the head with a club, I can't afford for them to be too much bigger than me. They're already probably leaner, faster, fitter, maybe fitter. I might not be able to hang with people at the beginning of the fight, but one of the things I try to do is I just wear them down out of sheer tenacity till they come down to my level of athleticism. And then now it's go time. Now we're on more of an equal basis, and so now it's you against me. And but if I'm going to perform at that level, my body's got to be working well. Everything's got to be, all systems are firing, because I need to be able to fight for a long time. Kind of to wrap this up, if you ever get a chance to go watch some fights locally, I think MMA fights are a lot more fun to watch than jiu-jitsu. But if you go watch some MMA fights, especially the lower quality ones, the ones at the local level, what I really want you to pay attention to is the fights at the beginning of the card. The guys that aren't that good, that aren't that well trained. And at least here locally, we'll see the guys that aren't very well trained. They can get after it for about 30 seconds. A real fight with two adults that aren't well trained, they got about 30 seconds that they can perform well. And then they'll start to puff and huff, and they'll separate. Sometimes even they'll start putting their hands down on their knees, and they'll just stand and take a break. But it's those athletes that train and bring it to the next level that they can fight a little bit longer. So a well-trained athlete can they can fight at full go for about a minute and a half. If you look at high school wrestling, that's argued to be one of the most demanding physical sports that there is out there. High school wrestlers only go 3 2-minute rounds. That's 6 minutes total. And even at the novice level for MMA fighters, they go 3 3-minute rounds. So it's just from hard work, hopefully good nutrition, and some things that I have that I can share with you guys if you're interested. So post in the comments down below if there's specific things that you have question about, whether it be nutrition, specific diets, whether it be fighting, MMA, jiu-jitsu, self-defense, that sort of thing. Let me know what you'd like to learn about, and we'll talk about it in upcoming videos. Again, get rid of those excuses. You're not too old. It's not too late. You can do anything you set your mind to. Have a good one.